Thank you so much, Grani. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back after break. I've been with you all morning and my head is spinning, so I can imagine how you're feeling as well. I am so excited to be here. I am Jeff Tobe, a professional speaker, author, and trainer. I am author of the wildly selling book, if I do say so myself, Coloring Outside the Lines. And I think today is about getting outside your comfort zone. I mean, that's really what we're talking about in We Think You're Great, Now Change. So let me start by taking you all back a little bit. The year was 1988, SMU Business School in Dallas, Texas, and they were studying change in major industries and professions in the United States and Canada. And I did a little bit of research, and if you were in the pharma industry, if you were in healthcare in any way, they basically found that you went through a major change in the way you do what you do every 3 years. It meant that by 1991, something was going to change drastically. Well, the reason I take you back so far is because they redid the study now 2.5 years ago for the fourth time. And they found that 3 years has been reduced to 7 months. And this is pre-pandemic, right? 7 months. What does that mean? Obviously, something you're doing right now, it's standard practice, is going to change drastically over the next 7 months. And so I can't think of a better way to start today's presentation by telling you that my job today is to make you feel uncomfortable. How cool is that? By kind of getting you outside your comfort zone and looking at what you do differently than you have before. So if you wouldn't mind, in the chat box, would you please put down one, just to answer this question, and that is, how many of you have ever heard of the 21-day rule? What does it mean? 21 days to do something. What am I talking about? Just put it in the chat box. So I have a challenge for you. I know I can't see you all at one time. I'd have to scroll and I don't have time to do that. But if you're wearing a watch or a bracelet, would you take it off and hold it up, please? Watch or a bracelet, take it off and hold it up. Now I want you to go find a padded envelope and I'll give you my address. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. No, I'd like you to take that watch or bracelet and I'd like you to put it back on the other arm. I know you don't want to. I know it's uncomfortable. Please appease me. And by the way, this is the only team building portion of my talk. If you need to go find somebody in your house to help you with this, that's okay. Anyway, if you've never done that before, how awkward is that? When did it just gain a pound from one arm to the other? But here's my challenge. Just until you go to bed tonight, I'm going to ask you to force yourself to wear this watch or bracelet on the other arm. As uncomfortable as this feels, every time you go to look at the time today, every time you realize that bracelet's on the other arm, I want you to ask yourself, what else do I do that's strictly a habit? That's all this is. I mean, if for the next 21 days or so, you consciously put this watch on your other arm, after 21 days, it would start to feel comfortable. Look, these changes you're going through can't possibly feel comfortable, but 21 days of trying something new to see if it doesn't feel more comfortable to you. Oh, and by the way, I know a lot of you, most of you know each other. So I want you to, this afternoon sometime, pick up the phone and just call somebody who's participating and ask them what time it is, and then imagine them doing this. So when it comes to driving change through the organization, I want to say that there are only 2 issues on your team's minds. They look like this. 1, 2. It's late. We're going to keep it simple, okay? The first is cost, and the second is value. And unfortunately, that's the ratio between the 2. Let me explain. I'm not talking about the price of something. I'm talking about the perceived cost of doing what you're asking me to do versus the perceived value, what's in it for me, as many of you have said. So, I think that when I'm talking about being creative with driving change through the organization, I'm not talking about, sitting at a potter's wheel and making a beautiful bowl. I'm talking about how do we creatively increase the value in our customer. Now, I'm going to use the word customer here because you all have internal customers and external customers. So this can apply to your team. It can apply to the physicians. It can apply to the patient. How do we increase the value in their minds so it becomes a bigger issue than the cost issue? If you'll allow me, I'll take it outside of what you do into what I do for a living. You know what I do for a living? I speak for a living. But what I really do is I sell dates on my calendar. That's what I do. If I sell a date on my calendar, it means business for my company. Going back, I was thinking to May of 13 years ago, I took a 21-day trip, 21 days straight of speaking. Now, you don't know me that well, But even with my ego, I got sick of hearing myself talk. That's a long time. But even worse, I now have a 30-year-old and a 28-year-old daughter, two daughters. But that was, I'd been gone 13 years ago. I'd been gone for over 3 weeks. It was disastrous for family life. I remember getting home on a Tuesday night. I'll tell you how I remember in a minute. But I sat them down at the dinner table. I said, look, this will never happen again. We're going to start a thing in the house called the 5-day rule. Went like this. Dad will never again go out for longer than 5 days in a row. And if I do, I'll stay home for the same amount of time. Well, you know what happened. First call Wednesday morning, the day after I got home. It's a gentleman from Dallas, Texas. He said, Jeff, I'd like you to come down and do a full day's patient experience workshop with my entire staff. I said, Paul, I'd love to. When? He said, check your calendar for some day in May. I checked my calendar. It's a Saturday. I'm available. But I realized right away that I'm out from Monday through Friday the week before. 5 days. Somebody is testing me. So I bite my tongue a little bit. I said, I can't do it. He said, and before I could even answer, he said, Jeff, don't give up so easily. Now, who's convincing who here? He said, when you were in Dallas, you told me you love video games. Now, I don't remember telling him that, but I do. Since I was a kid, I'll sit down and play a video game anytime, any place. And by the way, I'm looking at the average age on the screens. Yeah, no, I'm talking old videos like Miss Pac-Man and Asteroids, right? He said, we're holding our entire conference at a place here in Dallas, where he lived, called Dave and Buster's. Now, I don't know if anybody's familiar with this. Of course, worldwide, you won't know what I'm talking about. But this is about 1 million square feet of adult video games with a restaurant in the middle. So what's happened? Paul has no idea why I can't make his engagement, but subconsciously he's saying the cost must be greater than the value. And he's right. The perceived cost of doing his session is far greater than the perceived value. It's far greater than the perceived value. But by mentioning video games, guess what? That starts to grow. And here's the key, I think, to the change that you're going through and the change you're going to drive through your teams. I think that we have to figure out ways to increase that value for every individual customer, internal or external, versus the perceived cost. And you can see, I haven't told Paul about my 5-day rule yet, so that can't be big enough. I finally get a chance to tell him, and you know what he said? Jeff, don't give up so easily. He said, bring him with you. I said, who, my wife? He said, no, bring the whole family. I said, ooh, guess what? That's getting bigger. But then I realized as I'm looking at my calendar that I'm out Friday night, the night before he needs me on Saturday morning to talk to his staff. And I'm in I think it was Montreal, Canada, doing an after dinner talk. There's no way that you can fly from Montreal to Dallas after midnight or so in time to open up his 8 o'clock meeting. I fly all the time. It can't be done. I explained it to him. You know what he said? You know what he said? Jeff, don't give up so easily. He put me on hold. Came back maybe 20 seconds later. He said, Jeff, no problem. He said, I'm going to send the company jet. Now, I'm not sure if Pfizer has a jet, but I do want you to start thinking about everything we're taking back today. And by the way, if you do have a jet, you can forget about paying me. I'll just come. I'm only kidding. I've never been on a private jet because that engagement never worked out, and that's a whole other story. But it is about understanding the cost versus the value in your customers' minds.
What this organization desperately needs is change. Easily erasable. Camlin whiteboard markers.
All right. I just wanted to share that is not what we're talking about. Okay. So let's go on. I wanted to share 6.5 change thriving communication tips. So I truly believe it's not about managing change. We have to change our mindset, and it's about how do we thrive from the change? How do we take advantage of it and use it to our advantage? So, you're talking about more of a patient focus, I know, with Bold Move 3.3. And that's something that, again, how do we communicate this through our teams? So the first, number one, is communicate the reasons openly and honestly. Your teammates deserve your respect. Obviously, that goes without saying, but don't try to protect them from what's going on behind the scenes. I often find that with organizations, if you want them to stay engaged, we need to make sure they understand why the change is warranted. We just talked about that in our breakouts. A simple, direct, and straightforward approach will sort of quell any suspicion that there's an issue or problem that you're trying to hide. So you'll know you're on the right track when employees understand why the changes are being made. Number two is communicate the change from the top down, which you're doing anyway. I call it cascading. And yes, I know you've all been waiting. The point 5, make it fun. We already talked about this a little bit. Make it fun. Here's a way that somebody may change fun, and I'm going to ask you to cue up a video one more time. I'm going to share with you before I end, and the story behind it, a poem. And the first line is, coloring outside the lines is scary business. It means getting outside our comfort zone is scary, and I can prove it to you. I was scrolling through during our break, and I am amazed, but I actually caught one of you switching your watch back. That's very interesting to me. And I won't point you out, I promise, but that just means that's kind of your edge of the page. And so risk is different for different people. And we need to understand that about our teams as we drive this new change through the organization. For some of you, this is too risky. Some of you, the minute we end the meeting, you'll take your watch off and put it on the other arm. Or some of you will take my challenge until you go to bed tonight. That's just your edge of the page. We're all different. Coloring outside the lines, about getting outside your comfort zone, is, once again, I can't stress it enough, it's about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.